My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 28 years old, and I run one of the most successful law firms in Chicago. 9 months ago, my husband walked out of our apartment in the middle of the night. He didn't wake me. He didn't leave a note. The only thing I found the next morning was his wedding ring sitting on the kitchen counter and a voicemail from an unknown number that said, "Don't look for him." I spent 9 months wondering if the man I loved was even still alive. Then one rainy afternoon, I walked into a small diner on the south side of the city, and there he was, standing behind the counter in a grease-stained apron, pouring coffee for strangers. When I finally learned why he disappeared that night, I couldn't speak for a full minute. My entire life had been built on a lie. Before I tell you what really happened, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop your country in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I didn't grow up rich. That's the part most people get wrong. My mother raised me alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen. She worked double shifts as a nurse. I wore hand-me-downs until high school. Everything I have now, I built with my own hands. I graduated top of my class at Northwestern Law. By 25, I had already won 3 major corporate cases that made national headlines. By 27, I opened my own firm. The media started calling me Chicago's rising legal star. Magazine covers, news interviews, invitations to galas I never imagined attending. But the person who kept me grounded through all of it was my husband, Daniel. Daniel was a high school music teacher. He taught band to kids on the west side, the kind of neighborhood where most people had already given up. But Daniel never gave up on anyone. He stayed late to tutor students who couldn't afford private lessons. He drove kids home when their parents couldn't pick them up. He once spent his entire paycheck buying instruments for a student whose family lost everything in a fire. That was the kind of man he was. Quiet. Steady. The type of person who never asked for attention but somehow made everyone around him feel seen. We met at a farmer's market on a Sunday morning. I was rushing through the stalls trying to buy flowers for a client dinner, and I accidentally knocked over his bag of peaches. He laughed. I apologized 5 times. He said, "You can make it up to me by having coffee." That was 4 years ago. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at the Botanical Garden. Just 30 people, no magazine photographers, no press, just us. My mother loved Daniel from the first moment she met him. She said he reminded her of my father, the man who left before I was born. Not in the bad way, in the gentle way. The way he listened. The way he remembered things. But there was one person who never accepted Daniel. My older sister, Vivian. Vivian was everything I wasn't. She was bold, glamorous, calculating. She had married into one of Chicago's oldest real estate families. Her husband, Gregory Ashford, controlled half the commercial property on Michigan Avenue. Together, Vivian and Gregory had become one of the most powerful couples in the city. Charity boards. Political fundraisers. Their names were on buildings. Vivian never understood why I married Daniel. She told me once at Thanksgiving dinner, right in front of him, "You could have had anyone in this city, Renee. A judge, a senator, someone who matches your level." Daniel didn't react. He just smiled politely and passed the cranberry sauce. But I saw the way his jaw tightened. I saw the way he went quiet for the rest of the evening. After that night, I pulled Vivian aside. "Don't ever talk about my husband like that again." She rolled her eyes. "I'm just being honest. You're a brand now, Renee. And he doesn't fit it." I should have drawn a harder line right then. I should have told her that if she couldn't respect my marriage, she wouldn't be part of my life. But she was my sister, the only sibling I had, and part of me kept hoping she would come around. She never did. Over the next 2 years, Vivian's comments became more frequent. At family dinners, she would casually mention eligible men she knew. She would joke about Daniel's salary. Once, at my mother's birthday party, she said loud enough for the table to hear, "Must be nice having a wife who pays for everything." Daniel excused himself and went to the kitchen. I found him standing by the sink, gripping the edge of the counter. "I'm fine," he said. But his voice was tight. "I just need a minute." I hated myself for letting it continue. I hated that I kept making excuses. She doesn't mean it. She's just protective. She'll stop eventually. But she didn't stop. And the tension slowly started creeping into our marriage. Not between Daniel and me, between Daniel and the world I had built around us. Then came the night everything shattered. It was a Wednesday. November. I had been in court all day fighting a brutal corporate fraud case. I came home around 11, exhausted. The apartment was dark. I figured Daniel was already asleep. I dropped my bag on the couch, kicked off my heels, and walked toward the bedroom. The bed was empty. The closet door was open. Half of Daniel's clothes were gone. My stomach dropped. I called his name. No answer. I ran through the apartment, the bathroom, the kitchen, the balcony, nothing. Then I saw it, his wedding ring. Just sitting there on the kitchen counter next to a glass of water, like he had taken it off and walked away without looking back. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail. I pressed play. The voice was distorted, clearly altered through some kind of filter. Don't look for him. He made his choice. Move on. The message ended. For a few seconds, I just stood there. Then the panic hit me like a wall. I called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. And again. Nothing. I called his best friend, Marcus. He hadn't heard from him. I called the school where Daniel worked. The night security guard said Daniel had left at his normal time. No one had seen anything unusual. By 2 a.m., I called the police. They told me I had to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. I begged them. They said there was no sign of foul play. I hung up and sat on the kitchen floor, staring at that ring until the sun came up. The next morning, Vivian showed up at my apartment. I don't remember calling her. Maybe my mother did. Vivian walked in, looked around at the mess I had made tearing through drawers and closets, and sighed. So he left, she said flatly. I looked up at her from the couch, my eyes swollen. Something's wrong, Vivian. He wouldn't just leave. She sat down across from me and crossed her legs. Renee, men leave. It happens. Especially men who feel small next to their wives. You don't know what you're talking about. She leaned forward. I know exactly what I'm talking about. He was never comfortable in your world. You just didn't want to see it. She paused. Maybe this is for the best. Something cold settled in my chest. Get out. She blinked. Excuse me? Get out of my apartment. Vivian stared at me for a long moment. Then she stood up, straightened her coat, and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. When you're ready to think clearly, call me. I know people who can help you move forward. She said move forward like she meant move on. Like Daniel was already dead. But I didn't move on. Not that day, not that week. Not for 9 months. I hired a private investigator. His name was Frank, a retired CPD detective. He spent 3 months looking. He checked Daniel's bank accounts. No activity. His phone records. The last ping was from a cell tower near O'Hare Airport the night he disappeared. After that, nothing. Frank checked hospitals, morgues, shelters, bus stations, nothing. It was like Daniel had been erased from the earth. Whoever helped him disappear knew what they were doing, Frank told me. This wasn't a man who just packed a bag and left. Someone planned this. That sentence haunted me. Someone planned this. I kept working. I had to. My firm had clients depending on me, cases that couldn't wait. But every night, I came home to that empty apartment and stared at his ring on the counter. I never moved it. I couldn't. My mother tried to help. She came over on weekends. She cooked. She sat with me. But I could see her worry growing. Sweetheart, she said one Sunday, holding my hand. What if he doesn't come back? Then I'll keep looking, I said. Vivian called every few weeks. She had stopped saying Daniel's name entirely. Instead, she would talk about events she wanted me to attend, people she wanted me to meet. Gregory's partner has a younger brother. Handsome, Stanford Law. Very successful. I hung up every time. Months passed. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. By the 9th month, even I started to wonder if I was holding on to something that no longer existed. I had lost weight, I wasn't sleeping, my work was suffering. One of my associates gently suggested I take a break. "You're running on fumes, Renee," she said. "You need to take care of yourself." So one afternoon, I left the office early. It was raining, the kind of cold, heavy rain that makes Chicago feel like it's underwater. I was driving through the South Side, no real destination, just trying to clear my head. I passed a row of small shops and restaurants I had never noticed before. One of them had a neon sign in the window. Gus's Diner. Open daily. Something about it made me pull over. Maybe I was hungry. Maybe I just needed to sit somewhere that didn't remind me of my life. I pushed through the door. The place was small, maybe 10 tables. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon grease hung in the air. An old Motown song played softly from a speaker near the register. A few customers sat in booths, reading papers, eating quietly. Then I looked toward the counter. A man stood behind it, wiping down the surface with a rag. He wore a plain white t-shirt under a stained apron. His hair was shorter than I remembered, his face was thinner. His shoulders seemed smaller, like the world had been pressing down on them. But I knew that face. I knew the way he tilted his head when he was concentrating. I knew the shape of his hands. It was Daniel. The room tilted. My vision blurred for a second. I grabbed the edge of the nearest table to steady myself. A woman sitting there looked up at me, startled. "Are you okay, honey?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. I was staring at the man behind the counter, and the man behind the counter was staring back at me. Daniel's face went completely white. The rag slipped out of his hand. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I walked toward him. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Every step was heavy. The rain dripped from my coat onto the checkered floor. I stopped at the counter, 3 feet away from him. Close enough to see the dark circles under his eyes, close enough to smell the coffee on his skin. "Renee," he whispered. I slapped him. The sound cracked through the diner. Every head turned. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't touch his face. He just stood there, looking at me with those tired, hollow eyes. 9 months, I said. My voice was shaking. 9 months, Daniel. I thought you were dead. I thought someone hurt you. I spent every single night staring at your ring on that counter wondering if I would ever see you again. He said nothing. You disappeared. No call. No letter. Just a voicemail from a stranger telling me to stop looking. Tears burned my eyes. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced at the other customers watching us, then back at me. Not here, Renee. Please. Right here, I said. Right now. He studied my face. I think he realized I wasn't leaving without answers. He took off his apron slowly, folded it, and set it on the counter. Then he walked around to the front and gestured toward a booth in the corner, away from the other customers. I sat down across from him. My hands were trembling. For a long moment, he just looked at the table. Then he spoke. Vivian came to see me the night before I left. Everything inside me went still. What? Daniel nodded slowly. She didn't come alone. She brought Gregory and a man I didn't recognize. They showed up at the apartment while you were still at the office. My throat tightened. What did she say? Daniel took a breath. She said I was ruining your career. That my presence in your life was becoming a liability. That clients were starting to talk. That your reputation couldn't survive being married to a public school teacher. I stared at him. That's not true. I know, he said quietly. But that's not the part that made me leave. Then what? Daniel's voice dropped. Gregory told me he had connections with the Illinois State Bar. He said if I didn't leave quietly, they would file a series of complaints against you. Fabricated ones. Ethics violations, conflict of interest. Enough to trigger an investigation that would take years to resolve. Enough to destroy your firm. My blood went cold. He can't do that. He can, Daniel said. He showed me the paperwork. 3 complaints, already drafted, signed by people I'd never heard of. Ready to be filed the next morning. I shook my head slowly. No. He said if I signed the divorce papers and disappeared, the complaints would never be filed. Your career would be safe. Your firm would survive. Daniel paused. And then Vivian said something else. What? Daniel looked directly into my eyes. She said if I ever contacted you again, if I called, if I wrote, if I showed up at your door, she would make sure your mother lost her nursing license. She said Gregory had people at the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. She said it would take one phone call. The air left my lungs. My mother, I whispered. Daniel nodded. I know what your mother means to you. I know what your career means to you. They gave me an hour to decide. His voice cracked slightly. 1 hour, Renee. And in that hour, I couldn't figure out a single way to fight them without destroying everything you built. I pressed my hand against my mouth. Tears were falling freely now. So I packed a bag, Daniel continued. I signed the papers. I left my ring on the counter because I wanted you to know I didn't want to leave. I just didn't know how to tell you without putting you at risk. He paused. The voicemail was Gregory's idea. He had someone make it so you wouldn't come looking. I sat there, unable to speak. The man sitting across from me wasn't the man who abandoned me. He was the man who sacrificed everything, his home, his marriage, his identity, to protect me. And the people who forced him to do it were my own sister and her husband. Where have you been? I finally asked. Everywhere and nowhere, he said. I spent the first few months in Milwaukee, worked at a warehouse. Then I came back south because I couldn't stay away from the city. I found this place 3 months ago. Gus, the owner, he's a good man. He gave me a job and a room upstairs. No questions. Daniel. My voice was barely there. Why didn't you find a way to tell me? A letter, anything. Because I believed them, he said. I believed that if I made one wrong move, they would follow through. And I wasn't going to gamble with your mother's livelihood or your firm. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who once conducted a full orchestra of teenagers with so much joy it made me cry was now pouring coffee in a diner and sleeping in a room above a kitchen. And he had done it willingly. For me. I'm going to fix this, I said. Daniel shook his head. Renee, you can't fight Gregory Ashford. He has too much power. Too many connections. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I'm a lawyer, Daniel. The best one they've ever seen. And they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. He looked at me, uncertain. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what I do best, I said. I'm going to build a case. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked in silence. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Not my mother. Not my associates. I went to work every day like nothing had changed. I smiled at Vivian when she called. I attended a charity dinner where Gregory shook my hand and told me I looked well. But behind closed doors, I was building the case of my life. I started with the complaints Gregory had threatened to file. I pulled records from the state bar. No complaints had been filed, which meant they were holding them as leverage, ready to use if Daniel resurfaced. That alone was evidence of conspiracy. Then I dug into Gregory's business dealings. As a real estate developer, Gregory operated through a web of LLCs and holding companies. It took me 3 weeks, but I found it. A pattern of fraudulent property appraisals, inflated construction costs, and suspicious payments to city officials. Gregory Ashford, the man who threatened to destroy my career, had been committing real estate fraud for over a decade. I pulled tax records. I subpoenaed financial documents through a cooperating federal contact. I built a file so thick it could have served as a doorstop. Then I did one more thing. I contacted 5 former employees of Gregory's company who had signed NDAs after being forced out. 3 of them agreed to talk once I explained they would have legal protection. The night before I made my move, I visited Daniel at the diner after closing. He was stacking chairs on tables. "It's time," I said. He stopped and looked at me. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He set down the chair he was holding. What happens now? Tomorrow, I'm filing a federal complaint against Gregory Ashford for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. I'm also filing a complaint with the ARDC against whoever drafted those fake ethics charges. And then I'm having a conversation with my sister. Daniel stood there for a moment, then walked over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders and looked at my face. You don't have to do this for me. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it for us. The next morning, I drove to Vivian and Gregory's estate in Lake Forest. The house sat on 3 acres with a gated driveway and a fountain out front. I had been there 100 times. This time felt different. Vivian opened the door wearing a silk robe. Renee, it's 8 inches the morning. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said. Is Gregory home? She hesitated, then stepped aside. I walked into the living room where Gregory was sitting at a table reading the Tribune and drinking espresso. He looked up and smiled. Renee, what a surprise. I sat down across from him. Vivian stood by the doorway, arms crossed. I placed a folder on the table. Open it. Gregory raised an eyebrow and opened the folder. As he read, his smile disappeared. Slowly. Completely. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice lower now. It doesn't matter where I got it, I said. What matters is that the FBI will have a copy by noon today. Along with sworn testimony from 3 former employees, financial records showing fraudulent appraisals going back 12 years, and a detailed paper trail of bribes to city inspectors. Gregory's face hardened. You're bluffing. You know me well enough to know I don't bluff. Vivian stepped forward. Renee, what is this? What are you doing? I turned to my sister. 9 months ago, you and your husband came to my apartment while I was at work. You threatened Daniel. You told him if he didn't disappear, you would file fabricated ethics complaints against me and have our mother's nursing license revoked. Vivian's face drained of color. That's not what happened. It's exactly what happened, I said. And Daniel told me everything. Vivian glanced at Gregory. The look between them told me everything I needed to know. They had planned it together. Every detail. The threats. The voicemail. The disappearance. All of it. You made my husband believe he had no choice, I continued. You stole 9 months of my life. You let me think the man I love had abandoned me while you sat in this house and planned which eligible bachelor to introduce me to next. Vivian's voice turned defensive. I was trying to protect you. Your reputation. Our family name. You were trying to control me, I said. Just like you've been trying to control everything since the day I became more successful than you. The room went silent. Gregory pushed back from the table. What do you want, Renee? 3 things, I said. 1. You will withdraw whatever remains of those fabricated complaints permanently. I want written confirmation. 2. You will never contact Daniel, my mother, or me again. 3. You will resign from the board of every nonprofit and civic organization you currently sit on, because by this time next month, your fraud will be public knowledge either way. This way, at least you control the narrative. Gregory stared at me, and if I don't, then the FBI gets the full file today instead of next month, and your lawyers spend the next 5 years trying to keep you out of federal prison. The silence in that room lasted a long time. Gregory looked at Vivian. She looked at the floor. Neither of them had an answer. I stood up. You have until 5 o'clock today. Then I turned to my sister one last time. I loved you, Vivian. I trusted you more than anyone except Daniel. And you used that trust to destroy the most important thing in my life. My voice was steady, but something cracked underneath it. We're done. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that house, down the stone driveway, past the fountain, and through the gate. I got into my car and drove away. By 4:30 that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Gregory Ashford's attorney. Terms accepted. Documentation to follow. I didn't respond. The following week, news broke that Gregory Ashford was under federal investigation for real estate fraud. He quietly resigned from 3 boards. His company's stock dropped 14% in 2 days. Two of his business partners released statements distancing themselves. Within a month, Vivian had moved out of the Lake Forest estate. I heard through my mother that she was staying with a friend in Scottsdale. She never called me. As for Daniel, he finished his last shift at Gus's diner on a Friday evening. Gus hugged him and told him he always knew Daniel was someone special. "The way you treated people," Gus said. "That doesn't come from nowhere." Daniel came home that night. Not to the same apartment. I had moved to a smaller place in Logan Square, 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a fire escape with a view of a brick wall. It was nothing like the luxury condo we used to share. But when Daniel set his bag down in the hallway and looked around, he smiled. The first real smile I had seen from him in nearly a year. "It's perfect," he said. I handed him a small box. Inside was his wedding ring, the same one he had left on the counter 9 months ago. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me. "You kept it," he said. "I never gave up on you," I replied. He slid the ring back onto his finger. And for the first time in 9 months, I felt like I could breathe again. 2 months later, Daniel got a call from his old school. The principal had heard he was back. She asked if he would consider returning. The students had missed him. The band had fallen apart without him. Daniel walked into that school on a Monday morning, and 23 kids stood up from their chairs and started clapping. A few of them cried. One girl ran up and hugged him so hard he nearly fell over. He later told me it was the best moment of his life. My firm recovered. The cases I had neglected during those 9 months came back to life. I won 2 of the biggest settlements of my career that year. But something had shifted in me. I didn't care about the magazine covers anymore. I didn't care about the galas or the headlines or being called a rising star. What I cared about was coming home to the sound of Daniel humming while he cooked dinner. What I cared about was Saturday mornings when we sat on the fire escape drinking coffee and watching the neighborhood wake up. What I cared about was knowing that the person beside me had given up everything to protect me and that I had fought just as hard to bring him home. My mother met Daniel again on Thanksgiving. She cried when she saw him. She held his face in her hands and said, "I always knew you were a good man. Don't ever disappear on us again." Daniel laughed. "Never again." As for Vivian, I heard she eventually started speaking to our mother again, but she never reached out to me. Part of me still aches when I think about her. She was my sister. We grew up sharing a room, borrowing each other's clothes, staying up late telling stories. But somewhere along the way, she decided that power mattered more than people. And that was a choice I couldn't forgive. Some nights, when the apartment is quiet and Daniel is grading papers at the kitchen table, I look at him and think about what Vivian said that Thanksgiving years ago. He doesn't fit your world. She was right about one thing. Daniel didn't fit into the world she wanted for me. But he was the entire reason I built my own. My father left before I was born. Vivian's husband tried to destroy my marriage. But the man my sister called ordinary was the only man who ever truly loved me, not for the name on my office door or the number in my bank account, but for the woman who once knocked over his peaches at a farmer's market and apologized 5 times. And if you ask me today whether I miss the penthouse, the magazine covers, the power lunches, I will tell you the same thing every time. I would trade all of it again. In a heartbeat. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in real love. And if you want to hear more stories like this, click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you in the next one.